Keith. For those of you guys who don't know me, I am the producer support AmeriCorps Vista at Blue Ridge Women in Agriculture. And I would like to welcome Sophie Fries and Mary Stone of Wild Hope Farm.
Great. Sophie, there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ooh, hang on. There we go. You want to start us off, Soph?
Yeah. So as previously said, we are from Wild Hope Farm, and we run a CSA-based farm that operates on 12 acres with a half acre of cut flowers. We had 300 plus laying hens that we no longer have. It was not a profitable business for us. And then we have 10 to 15 employees during the peak season. During the off season, we have about 5 full-time employees. And then we do a lot of on-farm events like workshops and retreats, celebrations, you-pick events, fundraisers. The property that we sit on is about 265 acres. So there's lots of space to play. But like I said, we're growing on 12 acres of diversified vegetables. As I said, we are a CSA farm, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture, with all of you probably know. We do a 14-week spring summer season that starts April 26th and finishes up almost at the end of July. And then we do a 14-week fall CSA, and then we do a 10-week winter CSA that spans the months of January and February. We have multiple pickup locations, and we have various add-ons of flower bouquets, eggs, bread. The eggs and bread are produced by partners of ours. The flowers we produce on site. And we offer 2 different sizes of shares. One is a full share, which is $32 a week. And one is a small share, which is $22 a week. The full share feeds 3 to 4 people. And the small share feeds 1 to 2 people is how we describe that. We go to 2 farmers markets in the Charlotte area. We are, I don't think this has been said, we're located in Chester, South Carolina. So all of our produce ends up in Charlotte, which is 45 minutes north of us. And we go to the Uptown Farmers Market on Saturdays and the Matthews Farmers Market on Saturdays. And the Matthews Farmers Market we've been going to for 4 years since the farm started. And the Uptown Farmers Market, which is also a newer farmers market, started during COVID. We've only been going to for a year, but we've enjoyed it and we'll be returning this year. Oh, and it also says that these farmers markets double as CSA pickup locations, which is very convenient for us. We also do a good bit of wholesaling. Mary runs all of our wholesale at the farm, but we are partners with Grow Food, which is out of Charleston, Fresh List, which is out of Charlotte, Catawba Fresh, Happy Dirt, and then various chefs and brewers that we have become friends with over the years. And this is a great way for us to offload surplus produce that we can't push through the CSA. So in terms of hierarchy, it's like we plan our production around the CSA, and then a few key wholesale items, and then surplus goes through wholesale. Today, we're going to talk about record keeping and the kinds of records that we keep at Wild Hope. Mary and I keep most of the records or do most of the data entry here at the farm. And so we want to talk to you guys about our planting plan or our production plan, which is our largest document that we work off of and functions as the blueprint for our CSA. And then we also do a good bit of field tracking, data collecting in the field, CSA yield tracking, and then data collected through like CSA observation and opinion. And then we do a good bit of propagation tracking and direct seed tracking and things like that.
Yeah, so part 1 is all about just, why record keeping. So first, we have up here some of the positives and negatives around keeping good records. For us, one of the big positives is that it makes the organic certification process super easy and straightforward. We found that the better records you keep, also the more like it just gets easier because they trust you. They know that you're keeping track of everything that you need to be keeping track of. You're not, you're able to find what they're asking for, and that goes a long way with just making them trust you. And it feels like a really easy process. And then some of the other areas, so we track germination in the greenhouse, and then we do some overall crop yield tracking. We do some pest and disease monitoring throughout the season, and we feel like that's really helpful year to year. We might lose a crop one year, but if we know exactly what happened and have good records of that, then the next year we'll think, oh, we need to cover this with row cover or something like that. So all of those things are really helpful to try to troubleshoot some of the pest and disease issues that come up, especially where we are. It's so humid and there's a lot of pressure. And then we also keep records about customer feedback, and we do a pretty extensive surveys every time that we have our CSA. Even, and I'll show it a little later on, but even down to just each crop that's in the CSA, because we don't do a customizable share. So you might talk to some other farmers, or maybe some of y'all do a highly customized, box. We do enough shares that we feel like that's not the route that we really want to go. We do a farmer's pick, but we want our farmer's pick share to be something that's well balanced and that our customers, are excited about, and that will keep them coming back each season. And then overall, just, general organization for yearly improvements. And then also onboarding is much easier because everything's digital. So we can share that with any new staff members that come on board. Some of the negatives is that it's just can be really time consuming putting data in. We do everything digitally, so it's a lot of time with computer. And then, if you're keeping records and you're not actually using them to make better decisions in the future, then that's just time wasted that, for records that maybe actually aren't that useful. So each year it's good to check, oh, is this something we're using, or is this just me writing things down and it's not really helping me make a better decision? And then I'll talk a little bit about our planting plan. So I think, the best, or really the only way to have really good records is to start with a really detailed written plan that spans the whole growing season. And that way you have a plan for the whole year, and you don't get halfway through and realize you're scrambling to decide where are you going to put things and, that kind of stuff. And so I put up here some of the key elements I think that you should have, or that, I feel is really essential for us to have in our planting plan. And that's an estimated seed date, an estimated transplant date. So when does the field need to be ready for those transplants? And then an estimated harvest date, how long is it going to be in the field? And also that helps you determine when those markets need to be available for you to sell your produce. And then how much space it's going to take up, so you don't end up having way too many plants for the space or not enough. And that's so number of plants, and then of course where is it going to go in the field, which crops do you want to be in which locations. And then for us, the way we create this plan, we work backwards a little bit. We start with determining what our production goals are. For us, how many CSA shares do we want to do? That helps us determine how much diversity we want to have and how much of each of those crops we want to grow. And then, we have a lot of our wholesale is overflow that we just are trying to offload, but we have about 4, wholesale commitments that we plan for. And that's, for us, it's melons, green garlic, prickly pears, and we did a spaghetti squash last year. And so, those are things that we want to plan with those wholesalers up front, and then make sure, of course, that we have the space for in our planting plan. And then also, how many weeks of the year do we want to go to the farmer's market? So, that helps us to determine how many weeks we want to be pulling produce out of the field. And we kind of start backwards from when we need to have our CSA boxes ready, and then plan how much of each product we want to plant. And we do a lot of succession cropping. So, and year to year, we adjust based on kind of just experience. Oh, we did we did the right number of successions, but they were a little bit too big because we always had way too much or something like that. And then the last thing I would say is I would encourage people to have a digital plan. I think a lot of people do, just a paper copy, which works really well for a lot of folks. For us, I think with a larger team, we just like being able to share it among team members, and like I can pull it up on my phone, easily see like, oh yeah, like what do we have going on, like seating next week, like, and it's right there. It's maybe not for everyone, but I think for us, it's really helpful for sharing, and it's really helpful because it's always, the next year is if we just have that plan and like it can't be lost because it's online. And that's been really helpful for us. I just put a little example here. I picked cucumbers. So we use a program called Airtable. It's really similar to Excel. You could do pretty much all of these things in Excel or Google Sheets. And Airtable is free. We really like it because it has some kind of handy grouping and sorting and filtering tools that are really easy to use. And so that's one of the main reasons that we like to use it. But if you look here, I pulled out cucumbers as an example. So last year we did 6 successions of cucumbers. And so we have the number of succession, the variety we planted, and then we have a column with the estimated seed date and a column with the actual. And that way at the end of the year, as we're going through, we can see what we plan to do side by side with what we actually did. So that's true for the seed date. It's true for like the number of flats. Like we have like, oh, if we plant, we need to have 9 flat or 7 flats, but we seeded 8. So we had some buffer in there. And then it has the dates to transplant, the transplant date, and then this is just it scrolled over a little bit more. Same kind of thing. We had the actual transplant date. So like if for some reason we had to transplant much earlier because the transplants were ready earlier, then we can have notes like, okay, we need to actually shorten that time period and have the field ready earlier or do the seeding later. So things like that are, we use those notes like across the board. And then in our planting plan, we also have like how far apart the plants are spaced, how many bed feet the planting is, and so on and so forth. And then we always have lots of areas for notes, just narrative notes that we find are really helpful when we revisit everything at the end of the year. And that's another thing we do as a whole team is we revisit every planting of every succession for every crop at the end of the year as a team and sit down and really like talk about what worked and what didn't. And we find that to be really helpful. Let's see, there we go. The last thing I think in planting plan is we do, once we have our ideal plan, in Excel or in Airtable, we go through and we actually map out on our fields, like where everything's going to go, just to make sure everything fits. It all makes sense with our field prep and all those things. And we group everything by categories of things that get transplanted or seeded around the same date. And that way we're working in blocks in the field. It's really helpful for crop rotation too, but it also just, then you can think of things in bigger chunks instead of, individual seedings per se. And this is a picture of the document that we used last year for field mapping. So if you look at this, the left side is each of the beds and how long each of the beds. So it has the bed number, and then just to the left of that, it has the bed feet. And then in the actual, calendar, we made months. You can see which beds are planted with which crops, and that's just a really helpful visual. So we can see, okay, everything fits. This is how many bed feet it actually is. And, it's really easy to go out and do your transplanting and seeding during the busy time when so you don't have to even think about it. Like it's just there ready to go. I think Soph's going to talk a little bit about tracking the field.
Yeah. So for our organic inspection, we do track field activities and field applications, and that includes just any sort of fertilizing material that's put on the field. There's certain parameters on what time in relation to your cash crop, what time you can put those fertilizers out, either pre or post planting. And it's just really lovely. We also track field activities in Airtable, and it's really lovely to be able to sort by a specific crop or specific succession of a crop and know what activities occurred on that crop, or how many times we had to spray those cucumbers for cucumber beetles, or how many times we had to cultivate a certain vining crop before it vined out. And so that helps us with like the planning and adjustments and then execution and timing. And it's also really nice for new staffing to see what kinds of field activities happen at what time of year. So I actually, this past year, we did a system where we had field activities on a paper copy and I inputted them digitally. And it was just really nice for just me personally. I'm not really on the field side of things all that often. It was really nice to know, like, oh, these are all the field prep kind of things that were happening in the month of May. And so if I think all farmers think rather temporally, it's really nice to be able to see how your year happened. And again, the negatives are this is time consuming and hard to remember all the things you did in a day. And so we're trialing a few different ways of inputting quick notes in Airtable. You can almost set up a form-based system where you can just input like very brief notes. And we're going to see if that works for our field crew this year.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, here's an example of our Airtable field activity tracking document. It has the activity in one column, the planting. As you can see, it doesn't always get filled in, but we have the planting and then we have notes. A lot of the reason that we're sort of changing the way we're doing this coming year is everything would just get dumped into the notes. You would say like, oh, I amended with turkey litter and I amended these blocks, because our fields are numbered and lettered with blocks. And so it would just say like, oh, I spread turkey litter in all of field 3, block 1. That didn't happen to a specific planting, but because of our field map, we know what's going in field 3, block 1 after the application of turkey litter. So it's a matter of like piecing together our field map with our field activities log and the planting plan. These 3 sectors of our record keeping sort of all function together. Yeah, can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, I was just going to say, we're basically rebuilding the field activity log. It's not one that we feel like we've really nailed yet. So, it's something we try every year. We're like, oh, people didn't really fill out this column. Like, how can we make this something that's like a little bit easier to work with and manage? And so we're actually reworked that entire spreadsheet this year and give it another go. The last section is CSA and yield tracking. I believe the first part's about seeding and germination. So I'll let you talk about that.
So I do our propagation and our field seeding at Wild Hope, and useful records that I keep are direct seeding. We mostly use a Jang seeder, which operates on a system of rollers that have different holes. You guys might know this already, but they have holes that hold varying sizes of seed, and then gears that control the spacing at which that seed is dropped. And a lot of trial and error has gone into figuring out what works best for us. Propagation managers previous to me also created documents that I was able to work off of when I arrived at the farm. And it's a matter of how densely, usually it's a matter of how densely can we seed something like a cut green and still get a decent yield, or the highest yield we can get off of it without experiencing things like mold or that crop outgrowing its space. And so that's usually a conversation between Mary and I. I'm on the seeding side of things and Mary's on the harvesting side of things. And we're observing a crop throughout, a direct seeded crop throughout its life, and saying, oh, does this need to be thinned? Because our goal is to never have to thin. And sometimes, that goal can change because we want to ensure that we have a good stand. So that being said, all of these sort of observations and trials with different rollers and gears using the Jang is all recorded in a document, and then recorded like temporally also. Like every seeding and Airtable that I do, I go in and I say what gears and rollers and how much seed I put out. And so tracking seed weight is also a really important metric for us, because we can see how much seed we're using throughout the year. We can know how much arugula seed we need to order. for the coming season. And then also we can see that, you know, maybe our densities change throughout the season also. Like right now, I would say these early spring plantings, I'm seeding them a little denser than I normally would, just to ensure that we have a good stand. And then additionally, I track weather and bed conditions when I do go out into the field to direct seed. Just observations, how crusty is the bed, how dry is the bed, how chunky is the soil. And then I'm in conversation with our field manager about field conditions, you know, both pre and post seeding. Because sometimes, like if you're seeding something delicate like a carrot and you get a heavy rain after a seeding and then that bed crusts over, like those carrots aren't really going to come up, or they washed away in the rain. You never really know. So it is a matter of just tracking like conditions and observations along with the like physical weight of the seed you put out, and then trying to calculate, well, if I put out, I work in grams. If I put out 30 grams of carrot seed, with carrots, it's hard because they're so lightweight, and their seed count by weight varies, but you can say like, oh, if I put out X amount of seed and I seeded 5 rows of carrots in this bed, like I can do the math and figure out, okay, we should get about X number of carrots per foot because we are working off of bed feet, as a unit or a share unit. So yeah, that's sort of the direct seeding world. The goal is for it to be all in documents, so that if I need to go send someone else to direct seed and they know how to use the Jang, I can set them up with all the tools that they need.
Yeah. So Soph does everything propagation, and I do pretty much everything harvest related or CSA pack related. So on the other end of the spectrum. And I would say some of the most important logging that we do and that I do on the farm is a really detailed harvest log. And so we use the harvest log to make adjustments to our planting plan each year. We use like the yields we have between different successions to help us decide, make decisions about succession size or spacing and that kind of thing. Like I said before, we keep narrative notes, and then we determine an average yield per row foot. So Soph and I were talking in bed feet. So bed feet might say the bed's 100 feet long, but there's 4 rows in it. Then we would say, okay, it has 400 row feet. And then we try to figure out, okay, per share, we want a pound of carrots or a bunch of carrots, and we could get about a bunch off of, say, a foot. We use those types of data and analysis to help us determine what our average yield per row foot is, which then helps us to know, okay, this is how many row feet or how many bed feet we need to plant for 2 weeks of the CSA. And usually the way that works is that we buffer that pretty significantly, mostly because we know we're going to also be going to the farmer's market. And so especially with crops that are really popular at the market, we can do extra, and there's not really a lot of risk. But if there is some loss, then we're in a pretty safe spot. And that's also just one of the great things about a CSA is that it is so flexible timing wise, since we're choosing what goes in the box each week, that if something's a little faster or a little slower, we have other crops that we can sub in. Let me show, the next slide shows our whiteboard that we used in our pack shed. So this is on the left, you'll see the board. Well, I'll write the harvest list up for the day. This is a particularly long list, probably sometime late maybe in the summer around that, or early fall. And so I'll write down each of the crops we're harvesting, how much we want to harvest of each crop, which succession it is, which field and block it's in, the location. And that way, when the person goes to fill out the paper copy, so at the end of the day, we just have a clipboard. It hangs just to the right of the board. And it looks like the picture on the right. It's pretty much exactly a template of the whiteboard. And so we'll fill that out, and we'll want to put in that document the location, the succession, all those things. And all that's because I might fill out the paper copy for 2 or 3 weeks before I go to the computer to enter it in. And we want to make sure that like when it gets to the computer, we have each harvest event, like each day, linked with the correct succession and with the correct location. That way, when we go to do our yield analysis, we know, okay, like all of these harvest events, this total, amount we were able to get off this planting is tied to this planting in this location, and it doesn't get overlapped or confusing around that, which makes our yield analysis, as accurate as possible. And certainly we still miss some things. So this is all about the yield tracking part. So like I was just saying, the way that we track yields is we compile all of our harvest events from one succession, and then we determine how much was harvested per row foot to get an average yield per row foot. And like I said before, we just use this to determine how much we want to plant the following year and make adjustments. This is kind of a busy spreadsheet and certainly not something you need to like see or know all the numbers from, but this is like the most condensed version that I'll make at the end of the year, which just has each of our plantings, the seed date, the row feet, and then what we estimate the yield per row foot to be, and then what it actually was. And what we can actually do is as we go through each, like from year to year, we can adjust our estimated based on our actuals over time. So that's just a way to feel like, maybe somebody else can get this much per foot, but now that we've done it for 5 years, like we feel like for us, like this is the realistic number. So that it takes a lot of work, and I certainly don't think like someone needs to do this going into their first or even second year, but over time it's nice to sort of know like what you can expect off of, even if you did it like in 100-foot bed increments, like, oh, if I plant 100 feet of beets, like this is what I'm probably going to get approximately. Can be really helpful to make sure you're not growing more of something than you can sell. And I think that's the main thing that we don't want to do. We just don't want to grow more of something than our customers want, and we want to grow enough things that are like sort of the winners in the box, people's favorites. And then lastly, like I said at the beginning, we find that tracking survey feedback is really helpful, and also tracking what's in our box each week from year to year is really helpful, so that we know like, okay, this is what we had available in these weeks last year. Did that work? Did it not work? Were we short some weeks? And did we have too much other weeks? So some of those kinds of things. And then for me, when I think about how I want to build a box or a CSA, if that's your, the market that you're selling to, I want to have consistent variety. I want to have, consistent value. So hitting that $30 to $32 mark. A fairly consistent number of items. I think we fluctuate because some items we value more than others, or we'll put more in one week. People love broccoli, so I might give them a lot of broccoli if we have it and just not give as many other items as an example. And then overall variation throughout the season, being that they just aren't getting the same items every single week. Be like one thing that happens for us is that we always have, because cucumbers produce so much, kind of no matter what you do, for us to have enough at one time, we just have to plant a certain amount. And so we'll try to give cucumbers like every week, and by the end of the summer, people are like, I don't want any more. So that's something we've thought about, trying to figure out how to scale back and maybe find other outlets for, so that we can skip some weeks and not give them every single week. And then, yeah, I'm going to show an example of some of the survey feedback. One of the questions that we always ask people about is, what was their pickup experience like? We've even changed our time a little bit in the past just to reflect like people saying in the survey, like, I couldn't get in the parking lot, the traffic was too busy, or my kid gets out of school at 3, so like 4 o'clock's too late. So we used to do 4 to 6 at one of our locations, and we moved that back to 3:30, and it seemed like even just that minor adjustment went a really long way. People really appreciated that. And then we asked them about each crop, like, did they feel like they got too much of something, too little, just the right amount? As in addition to just the overall size of the share, did they feel like it was satisfied, or were they feeling like they were throwing stuff away because they couldn't get to all of it by the end of the week? And so I put up here, like, this is how we do our like by crop question of, they just see the crop, they say, was it too much, too little, or just right? So one thing you can see here is it seems like people could have taken more arugula, looks like people could have taken more bell peppers. But overall, I mean, you're seeing that most people were pretty satisfied with crops across the board. And this is what it looks like for all the crops. Every now and then you'll see a spike from something like, oh, too much basil, or, some people feel like, daikon radishes or turnips or some of those like kind of funky, less popular items like kohlrabi, they may have only gotten it once and they're still putting that it was too much. So we've thought about, last year we actually talked about adding a fourth option that was just like do not like, and that way people are maybe not just putting too much, but actually like we know like, oh, they just don't want it at all, versus something like basil, like maybe they got basil too many times, but they would have liked to have it 2 times, just not 4 times or something. So we find this part of the survey in terms of records to be really helpful. I'm going to skip that for now, but maybe if y'all have questions about Airtable, I can come back to it. Yeah, and then in our conclusion, just gonna say that, sorry, let me do this with all we got in here. It's really helpful, definitely, for just getting the most out of your plantings, and making sure that you're not wasting space or time growing things that you're unable to sell. And then, another thing is that we find that having those records be digital has been like really essential for us, especially because we've had a lot of staff turnover. And so that's another part. It's nice to share with your staff that's there, but it's also like if you're suddenly have a new farm manager or a new assistant and they're trying to specialize in something, it's really nice for them to come in and like be able to see the history of the farm. Like, we're only 4 years old, but luckily we have a lot of information to kind of guide us, especially because we're such a young farm. It's really helpful. And then lastly, I'm just gonna reiterate that if you are organic certified or planning to be certified, having good records just makes that process, like, we don't even really have to think about that because we're already doing all of these things for our own benefit. And so it works really well. Like, they want to have things like a crop rotation plan. They want to know, everything that you put out on your fields, amendments, fertilizers, any of that stuff. And so it's just really helpful if you're already doing that for your own benefit. I think some people feel like getting certified is a really big hurdle. And I think it might be financially sometimes for people, but I think the records part is really manageable and also just beneficial for your own growing practices apart from the actual certification process. But that is that. Also, we're hiring, kind of forgot this was in here, but yes, we are still hiring. We are hiring a seasonal crew member. So just someone to come work 8 months and just dive into farming. That's an entry-level position. And we're also hiring a tractor operator. So if you know anyone interested, the farm does have some available housing as well. So if that's a hurdle for anyone, or if y'all know anyone looking to just dive into 12-acre farming, we are really happy and excited to have people join us. So spread the word if you can. And yeah, we can take questions, and I can go back to any slides if anybody has anything they want to see again.
Yeah, I have a question. You say you have I'm primarily a cut flower grower. What kind of, I know you're talking about your vegetables, what kind of records do you keep for your cut flowers? And what seems to be, I started in 2020. So I am still like developing what is going to sell. So what kind of record keeping do you keep for your cut flowers, and what have you found to be the most successful of your cells?
Yeah, that's a great question. I manage our cut flower production, like I said, and what we have developed is a planting plan really similar to the one that Mary showed you with the vegetables. I would say it's a little simplified. We don't necessarily work off of bed feet, and like we're not trying to like reach a certain number of stems. because as you know, like with cut flowers, it's like you might get 12 stems off a plant a week, or you might get 6. And so what we track with, are you going to pull it up, Mary?
I was going to, yeah, I'm working on it. Things in my way.
You can get to it.
Yeah, I got it.
With our cut flower production, we track our varieties that we're seeding, and based on their days to maturity, I try to formulate like an idea, a general idea. I don't have a great one, a general idea of like what's going to come in when, based on days to maturity, which is in this column over on the right. So yeah, we've got crop type and variety, the succession. We also succession plant, days to maturity. The type of producer column is a leftover from Florette. I'm sure you're familiar with Florette. She's one of the all-star flower farmers in the United States. And so that is the type of producers, like, yeah, you know. And then we've got our sow date and our actual date, the number of trays, or whether or not I direct seeded that crop. As you know, like once you get into summer, you can direct seed a lot of your sunflowers and zinnias and cosmos. And then the estimated bed feet is just a way for us to track like how much space we're taking up in the field. It's less planned. It's more so I'm tracking like the length of harvest. So I'm tracking first harvest date and last harvest date, or the last day that I feel like it's worth getting a crop off of that planting. And so that is sort of what I'm tracking. As for what varieties or what flowers I'm growing throughout the season, it sort of is this lovely mix of, you know, you've got cool season stuff in the beginning, you know, your hardy annuals, your bachelor's button, and your Queen Anne's lace, and your bells of Ireland. And then I can kind of push that envelope and do a second planting in mid-January, or second seeding in mid-January. And those will come in around Mother's Day or a little after Mother's Day. We have not had great success with things like tulips yet. So our first stuff is our hardy annuals that come in around Mother's Day. And then after that, we'll fall into sort of our in between, our shoulder season crops like straw flower and cosmos and status and those kinds of things. And then I don't know where you're located, but we get really in a pickle right around like late July and August and September. Things just really don't want to flower in that kind of heat. So we back off and we simplify and we grow what we know is going to produce, which is a sunflower, a marigold, a zinnia, your boring basics that I'm really sick of growing, but they sell at market. I mean, growing them.
And what can you do? No, I'm in the Asheville area, and
oh, so you got a little more leeway.
A little more leeway, but yeah. So like I said, I'm really new to it, and the succession planting. So between your plantings, do you guys do cover cropping, or you know, when do you do the cover cropping? And
yeah,
like that.
we have, so we've changed things a little bit. We used to have our dahlias. We have a pretty extensive dahlia collection, and we used to have those in our main production field. And because of the the length of their season, that meant that we were sort of hanging around waiting for them to be done so that then we could pull them out, store them, and then get the field prepped, get beds prepped and stuff for spring. So this season our dahlias are in a different field, and hopefully, you know, I think I tend to want to wrap up the flower season sooner than maybe most flower farmers, because it's not our sole source of income.
Yeah.
And so we'll push our season until the end of October, or mid-October. And then after that, we're growing in black plastic, which I assume that you knew we're growing in black plastic. And so we'll rip all our crops out and rip up that black plastic or landscape fabric. And we'll try to squeeze in a red clover or a crimson clover cover crop. Honestly, we've been speaking lately that it might make more sense to move towards a more no-till system or a permanent bed system in our flower garden. It's an odd field, and it's sort of hard to get a tractor in there. It's awkward to get a tractor in there. And so I think we might move towards a permanent bed system that maybe we cover crop in, but those cover crops are terminated with a tarp through occultation. So I would like to experiment more with that. I didn't do that at my previous flower farm, and we haven't done that here yet. So also, I mean, also I think sometimes people are moving away from cover cropping and saying, well, compost is just decomposed cover crop. And so we might just do some composting this fall. So yeah, it's always a trade-off of like, when can I end my season and when can I still like take the time to care for the land that I'm growing on?
Yeah, exactly. And do you guys use a specific organic compost service, or do you guys do it on your own?
We pick up compost from, is it Mecklenburg County?
Well, we've gotten it from Chester County. We have gotten it from Mecklenburg County, and we actually recently found a neighborhood that collects a ton of leaves in the neighborhood, and they actually make leaf compost. And so our next compost we're going to try is from, it's just like a private neighborhood that collects a ton of leaves and they compost them themselves.
There are plans to have an on-site composting facility for the farm, but we need someone to run that, and it's not
God,
gonna be
I know.
us.
God, you get so much plant waste, and I just like dump it all into one area, and you're just like, God, I just need to be able to manage it.
Right. Well, yeah, we do the same thing. We have compost piles, but they're not managed to be like particularly nutritious when we put
We're
them.
just trying to break things down and get rid of them.
Yeah, exactly. And I would love to turn that into like the green gold, to put back.
Yeah, and I feel like there just aren't as many compost sources. It seems like really good quality compost sources in this area. I think it's hard to find for an affordable price. We definitely have struggled with that too. So we kind of take what's cheap, but then we sort of know that it's not ideal, and we're going to have to use like other amendments and fertilizers to help boost up the nutrients in our soil.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, those are just some of the questions that just, as a new farmer just getting into, and so this what's it called again? This platform that you're using?
Airtable.
Airtable. Okay.
Yeah, they have like a pro version, but we use the free version, and as long as you aren't doing a crazy amount, like it's a really large amount before they're like, you have to upgrade. So
yeah, no.
Imagine that you're probably set.
I'm tiny right now, so.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, if you are into it, just kind of mess around some. I'm always happy to troubleshoot, down the road. If you want to email and talk more about setting it up, we're around and happy to do that.
Thank you guys so much. This has been yes.
Lori, what is your flower farm like, or what kind of acreage are you growing on? Or
right now I'm growing on 0.25, and my neighbors have a 5-acre plot that's like literally right next to me, that I am slowly convincing them to let me take over. So but 0.25 is a great size to start with. And I broke ground in 2020, and then in 2021 I did a farmer's market. I've done sold to some florists, and done a few events for some people downtown, just some bouquets, for like the Walls Art Gallery,
nice.
Do a few things down there. So just sort of getting into this slow, but I've had some really frustrating times, of course, in your first couple of years. One of my most frustrating is plant supports. I'm having a really, really hard time in developing how to support some of these taller plants, and just working through it. So,
Yeah, I feel like Asheville growers deal with a lot of wind, or flower growers I know in Asheville deal with a lot of wind in
oh
regards
my
to,
God,
yeah.
yes. So
Yeah.
that's one of my things for this year is planting some hedgerows.
Yeah.
Yeah, to help with that because my cold crops for my flowers, keeping the frost fabric down is just
Impossible.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. And then I live in a neighborhood, so my neighbors, it's like at first, in the summer they're like, oh, it's so beautiful, and in the wintertime you have all this frost fabric, and then you have cinder blocks and all that kind of stuff. So you know what I mean? You're like, okay, I'd like to do this a little bit better, but right now this is all I got. So
Gotta do what you gotta do.
yeah.
Well, nice.
That's awesome. You would hate us here. We have very little wind pressure, and so most things we grow, we don't use any sort of horizontal trellising at all.
Oh, God. Yeah, and then just to figure out how to get the what's it called, that I can't even think of it now, that plastic trellising thing to stay up. I'm
Yeah.
just, yeah, to keep my stuff up, because last year I had a lot of beautiful flowers that weren't supported correctly, so I couldn't use a lot of them in bouquets because they were all like that. So yeah, so
you need to find that like one weird florist who's into that kind of stuff. They're out there.
yes, I found a couple that I've had some really good success with, and I think wholesale is definitely more of the way that I want to go.
Nice. Yeah.
So there, it's for CSA, you know what I mean? Just doing a pure flower CSA, you know what I mean? Leaves a lot to be desired, and there's just not a lot of,
it's a lot of
not
work.
a lot of takers.
It's
on
a lot
that.
of work. I
Yeah.
think the convenience of our flower CSA is that it's partnered with our vegetable CSA. So that really is why it functions in that sense.
Yeah, and we don't count on all of our CSA vegetable share members to be flower share people too. It's just like a 6th or something, and we pretty much hit capacity. Anybody else got questions or anything?
Yeah, I have a question. What are some, like, have y'all experienced any like downfalls from the system, or like things that you look back and you wish you'd set up differently, being like a couple years into using this?
Yeah, I would say one thing overall that the farm is just now trying to like really figure out is our crop rotation. We just didn't do a good job of like not planting things in the same space in like a we now are trying to set it up that going forward we're going to be planting something in a particular family every 3 years. But I think one thing that happened is because we didn't have a really great crop rotation set up initially, or like really thought through, we came up with all these plans for how much we were gonna plant, how double cropping and doing all these things, and then now we're kind of like, no, we need to prioritize crop rotation, and because we need to do that, like we have to just change some of the amounts of things that we plan to grow. Like we were doing way too many brassicas, or like proportionally, particularly brassicas and cucurbits are the areas where we have planted a lot more in the past. And so now we're like, well, how do we change, what goes in our CSA to a little bit and plant less of some of those crops, just to make that work. And we finally have gotten somewhere in the last literal 2 weeks. We kind of have a plan for the next couple of years that we're going to try. But we've had 2 different farm managers, and so through that transition in 4 years, that has been a really hard thing to kind of overcome. And we've noticed like pest pressure being higher in cucurbits because they've been planted in the same field like back-to-back years. And we noticed that in like another field where we hadn't had any, it was like way better. And then we've had some other, Cercospora and things like that are like hard to avoid anyway, but we feel like it's really important that we kind of get that set straight. And that's going to definitely affect a lot of just how we do our planting plan. It's going to be a lot more like constrained to like the size of those blocks that we're trying to rotate, and not just like, oh, well, this is how much we want to grow, so we're going to just figure out how to make it fit. And I think we used to function a little bit in that way. And so I'm curious to see kind of what that transition feels like, and if it works well enough that we can still meet the needs of our markets. And yeah, other than that, I mean, we always are just trying to figure out ways to like minimize the amount of work we're doing around record keeping. I cut some fields out, every year. I'm like, oh, we don't really need to do this. Or like we used to, we self-track germination in the greenhouse, but like only to the point that it's really helpful for us to decide like how much we need, extra we should be seeding of different types of crops, and like, do we need to reseed and that kind of thing.
With that stuff, I feel like it's less of a like, oh, I put that number in the Airtable, 89% germination. It's more so like making sure that my eyes are on that like 3 days after things have popped, when things have popped, and making that decision then. So it becomes less about the record keeping and more about what actions I take.
And I think the same is true for the direct seeding stuff. Like we've spent a lot of time taking records from direct seeding, but the goal is to find a roller that works and the gears that we like, and to just go out and do it. Right? Like we weigh the seed to make sure that it went out, but like it's not like, oh, every time like I'm gonna try like 4 different rollers. Like I've done that before in the past, where we did different gears for 4 different rows just to see what comes up and how good it looks. And so we try to get, some of that work up front, we try to get past to a point where we're like, okay, this is what works. Like, we don't want to waste time. Experiment's a good thing to do. But I think once you feel like what works for you, you only change it maybe if you start to feel like it's not working. So yeah, and I think, overall, I would say the harvest and the planting dates are really the things that I feel like are essential, like harvest amounts and planting and transplant dates, in terms of like vegetables in the field being helpful in the long run. Hope that's helpful. Yeah, I feel like the crop rotation thing has been a big hurdle for us. But
do you guys use plug brokers at all, or is it all just, do you guys do it all on your own?
Well, with flowers, we do order some plugs from Farmer Bailey, and then our potatoes and onions and what else?
Sweet potato slips we buy in.
Okay.
Garlic seed we've bought in twice now, and so we're trying to keep that seed clean and healthy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do order some flower plugs with things like digitalis and
Lysianthus. God,
I don't even grow Lysianthus.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
A huge seller. So I still
it's beautiful.
Banner greenhouses, which is near me. They just got sold out to Bonnie, so they completely, it's like I used to be able to buy a 75 plug tray of Lysianthus for $14. You know what I mean? And I could just go pick it up myself, and then you can sell Lysianthus for like, you know what I mean? It's like wildly popular, and they quit. So I have to do from Farmer Bailey as well, and it's like 3 times the cost and the shipping, and it's just heartbreaking.
We enjoy Farmer Bailey, high quality.
I do too. Yeah. No, I do like Farmer Bailey as well. So, but a lot of times, because I'm such a small farmer, You know what I mean? It's like, I would love to have a 75 plug tray, and they
Mhm.
sell 210 plug trays. And I'm like, I don't have the space yet. So
You'll get there. We don't even really have the space for a 200 tray. Any other questions? Well, we are always accessible by email, or you can find our website at wildhopefarm.com, and our Instagram is Wild Hope Farm as well. And Mary and I just really love record keeping. It makes us feel safe and secure at night. So if you would like to feel the same, yeah, just holler.
Yeah, we're happy to help. I'm definitely happy to help anybody just troubleshoot, or even other things too. Like we're just
Or also
know,
brainstorming, like, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Or also, I feel like a lot of people are not 12-acre CSA based farms, and so like we're also really happy to talk succession planting on smaller acreage, or succession planting for a farmer's market. Like I was thinking about carrots when you were talking about carrots, Mary. It's like something that we often do, and maybe this is intuitive, is a carrot succession will come in and we'll bunch half of it for 1 week of the CSA, and then we'll top the other half of it so that we can store it for a future farmer's market or a future CSA week. So we're also super happy to talk like how to strategize, like you planting, X amount of something and
making it go further.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of season extension too is like, especially if you're a small farm, like a market garden or something, trying to go year round. A lot of season extension is really like honing in on storage crops. Like our winter CSA is about 50-50 storage and then out of our high tunnel, and it feels like we can, we're just meeting our numbers by doing that. So we'll have like carrots, turnips, some radishes, butternut squash, sweet potatoes, all of that stuff in storage. And then we'll have all of our lettuce and arugula and that kind of stuff in the high tunnel. And I also recommend, if you're a small farm and you want to get into the CSA model and you don't want to grow storage crops, like that's something you could easily partner with another farm. Like we bought in potatoes before because we just didn't have a good crop or didn't have enough. And it's a really nice way to buffer your CSA, is to maybe buy in a few storage crops that keep really well. And then that way you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have a gap for week 8 or 9, but I know I feel like a little stressed about that. We feel like, as much as we can, we grow what we put in our shares, but we definitely, like, if we feel like we need to, talk to another farmer, or, use a food hub even to help support, fill in the gaps. Those are things that can help when you like are in a pinch and you're realizing your production is not going as planned.
We have a couple questions from Hedge Family Farm. One was, what are your yearly sales like on 12 acres? And if I remember correctly, we did 45,000 an acre last year.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was around 45.
And that was with 400 CSA members.
And yeah, we had,
which was your second question, was how many CSA members we have. We have 400.
To be more specific, yeah, it was about it was 400 in the spring. It was closer to 325 or 330 in the fall for those 14 weeks. And then it was, it's about 90-ish right now in the winter. So we do scale back CSA numbers pretty significantly in the winter. And part of that's just to keep folks like Soph and I, around in the winter. I mean, we love growing year round. It definitely helps with CSA member retention, but it also allows for some of us to make this like a full-time job, which I think the farm has really supported us in doing that. So I was going to say something else about the dollars per acre. You said 45. Yeah, I think that's about right. I know, in our wholesale.
Obviously an average.
Yeah. And I don't remember the CSA sales off the top of my head, but I know we did about a little less than 100,000 in wholesale, which was like way over what we thought we would do, and around the same amount in farmers markets, which means the CSA produce was probably in the 400 something range. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I think for the year is about 450 ish, around there. So that's helpful to think about scale.
Oh, thank you. I used to live in our Airbnb. Someone said that they liked our Airbnb space.
Yeah, I don't know where my questions are, so feel free to read them if you want.
Here, I'll read you this one, Mary. What's our CSA retention rate?
Oh, that's a good question.
I want to say it's like 86.
Yeah, I think it's in the 70s to 80s. I'm pretty sure it's around there. It's not like 100 or anything, but I think it's 70 to 80%. I know we have some people who have been with us, like a core group who've been doing it for 3 or 4 years.
That 90 number in the winter is we're pretty sure those are also spring, summer, and fall members as well.
Dedicated followers.
There are persistent customers.
Yeah, and also just another thing, we didn't give a lot of history about the farm, but they started the farm in 2017 at about an acre, and then they jumped to 3 acres the next year, and then 6 acres, and then we've done 12 acres now, actually only for 2 years. So, a lot of this is like, we don't necessarily feel like we've stabilized, by any means. I think we've definitely like maybe grown a little too fast in some ways. So I certainly,
our field sizes are changing, the spaces and our field shapes are changing. We still have a lot to figure out.
Yeah, so I think, and in the earlier, I think we had like 100 and something CSA members, and so each year we're sort of figuring out what's working for the farm. We're actually growing more on 9 to 10 acres this coming year, and part of that is just a staff turnover. Like, we felt like we had some of our like leadership move, and so we just felt like, well, it's just, rather than rush to like find just anyone, like we're just going to kind of scale back and just feel it out and see sort of how it goes to do a little bit less. I mean, we're still doing quite a bit, and several of us have been around for now 3 years, and one of our folks has been with us since the beginning. So
we are at 4 full-time crew members. I misspoke when I said 5 earlier.
Yes, and part of that is because 2 of them left. So yeah, we're down to 4, and then we're getting more in the coming months. We have 3. Yeah, I'll say that one more time. Please tell anybody you know who wants to work at the farm. I mean, I'm sort of kidding, but also not at all. We would be excited to have some more applicants.
We would.
Any information, the website has all of our job listings posted with very thorough, like, everything you would need to know about the job. And you can email Catherine at Wild Hope. She's not either of us, but she sort of is our HR person.
And that being said, too, we're a very young business, and so business ventures and opportunities are wide open. We have new ones coming and going all the time. Yeah,
I think sometimes it's hard. People want to work at farms and then feel like there's not a long-term opportunity, and I think that's definitely not true for us. So there's plenty of long-term opportunity, and also we do have some summer harvester positions. So like, if like college students who are just want to maybe work on a farm for like 2 months, like, we also have those types of opportunities available. Someone who just really wants like a short term, like, oh, I just want to see what farming is about. Like, we really ramp up in the summer, and so there's a lot of opportunity for folks to come down.
Another question we got is how many tunnels / greenhouses we have. We have 2 80-foot tunnels, and then one heated greenhouse and one unheated greenhouse that is more so a staging space or a hardening off space. And then we have an outdoor propagation area where most of our summer production happens.
Like a shaded area?
Yes, it has shade cloth.
We are, I think, maybe at the end in the fall of next year, going to possibly be getting another high tunnel. I think we've gotten our first 2 like through NRCS grants, so we've kind of done them one every 2 years for since we started. So there's that's sort of how our high tunnel production has come to be.
Oh, thank you, Jess, for posting that farm labor link page. I will send that to Catherine.
Sure thing.
That's really helpful.
There's the chat. Cool.
So somebody just messaged
Awesome.
in the chat, and I think they just messaged it to me privately, but it looks like they meant to send it to the group. Lisa Armstrong says, I wonder if y'all need someone who understands gardening to do your data entry, as a question. Have y'all found that that's the case?
Like a separate party to do our data entry for us?
Or if it maybe if it helps to have some gardening or some farming knowledge to do this sort of data entry.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our data entry is like in the field, and it is taken and recorded in the field, and so it's usually someone who's with us. If it's not me or Mary, then it's someone else who knows how to use Airtable. But honestly, like at least my form of record keeping, it's just a lot of math. So if someone's really good at math and wants to help, like you don't have to know much about gardening, but if you can divide crazy numbers, call me.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of our a lot of it is just like as you go, pretty it's not as much as I think it seems like it is. When you look at it all at the end of the year, it's like a lot, but week to week, it's like, oh, we seeded stuff like one day this week, and then we just kind of put that in as we go. Yeah, and a lot of people are working on it all at the same time too.
That's super cool. Would
When you guys are doing yields, oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
When you guys are doing yields for your cut flowers, how do you count the yield? By bunches or?
I always get this question, and I go with my gut. I'm so sorry. But I think it's in my brain, it's like, I know what is going to produce a great transplant for me. And I know what's going to be an easier flower to grow and what's going to be a more difficult flower to grow. And these things too. And so I really love silly flowers like Cosmos that last 3 days in a vase and are stupid to grow, but I love them. And so I grow the shit out of them, and haven't gotten a complaint.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't.
That's okay. No, that's okay. I do the same thing. I just sort of, it's
But
like,
it is, something I will say is, and you probably do this, is take a lot of photos of the finished bouquet product, and those photos are all time stamped. And so it's really helpful for me to go back at the end of the season, or someone else did this for me this year, but cycle through all those photos and see like, oh, we had burplurium for these weeks, and because they showed up in our bouquets, and I planted this number of bed feet, and that felt good.
okay.
And so that's kind of how I formulate that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've been doing it all by sort of feel. I mean, you know what I mean? There's little math, but there's a lot of a feel to it. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I feel like that point about pictures and timestamps across the board can be really helpful. Like, I mean, for flowers definitely, but I mean for field prep, I don't know. I just feel like, or like if I see something that's like something's really wrong here, I'll take a picture and be like, oh yeah, now I remember, like that's what happened. And it's
as a crew,
yeah,
as a crew, we share and contribute to a shared Google Photos. I would say one of our crew members contributes much more often. Our marketing, Catherine, our Instagram lady.
She takes
contributes far more often than we do, but it is really helpful just to have a database of all the photos of like just everything you've ever done on your farm.
Anybody else?
Sorry, one more thing. Would you guys mind going back to the slide where you talked about like compiling all your harvests from each succession to find the total yield?
Yes, for sure. Let me
Thanks. Sorry.
make y'all a little smaller. No, you're good. No worries at all. I can show you y'all one other quick Airtable thing too in a sec. That might be. You talking about this one? Which one were y'all? Is this the one?
It was, I think it was like the one after this.
That one?
Or maybe before.
And also at the beginning, there was one, this one. But it might have been, I feel like maybe it was this one.
It was like a list of like bulleted points. But that's it.
Oh,
Yeah,
might
it
have
was just everything you do to
been-
find your like your total yield and like your beds, like all that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I think it might
Yeah, I
have
think it's
been.
this one. No, I think you were
Determine
just
the average
there.
yield per foot.
I think you were just there.
What was that?
I think you were just there. Like, yeah, back one. Sorry. Yeah. Nope. Close. There we go. Okay, sorry.
This
I'm
one?
just like gonna take a picture of it.
No,
I
that's
was trying
okay.
to write down notes. And
Yeah, of
I
course.
couldn't
Of
write
course.
them fast enough. Thank you.
No, of course. Sorry, I was confused.
No, you're fine. I like did not explain it well at all. Thanks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me show y'all maybe one, since we're at the end-ish, I could show you one cool thing about Airtable. Oh, this isn't the one I want. No, it is. So one of the reasons we like that I like Airtable versus Excel is, so let me go ahead and cancel all this out. So this slide here, or this tab of Airtable, minus all those theirs are just empty fields, but this has every single event, like harvest event from the whole season. So it just, just goes and goes and goes. And honestly, this takes less time to input than you think, because it's all like the paper has all the information very easily. And a lot of this is like I click on the succession and it actually autofills the rest of these columns. And so that's a little bit like I set that up because I wanted to, but it makes it really easy to fill out this this table. And then we have like the quantity that we harvested that day and then the unit. And that way, like if there's something like carrots where sometimes we harvest in bunches and sometimes we harvest in pounds, I can go back and see, exactly what I was talking about. But I was just going to show these filtering effects. So like one thing I can do pretty easily is like, this is every harvest event from every crop, but I can go in, say crop, cucumbers, and then I can go to like group by succession, and it has these like summary functions. So now I have it grouped by succession and I have all the harvest events just for cucumbers. So if I scroll over, I can really quickly and easily see like, oh, in the first succession of cucumbers, like we got, 1,800 pounds. And in the second succession, we got 29. And in the third we got 35. And so this doesn't show the bed feet, but actually I know that they were all very similar because our successions are about the same size for cucumbers. And then I can easily see too that like we got to the fall and our fall cucumbers always do not as well as the spring and summer, just from throughout the year, like more pest pressure. So it's just really cool. Like some of these things, like I can go in and kind of really quickly say like, oh, I'm looking at all my cucumbers. I'm looking at their successions. I can see, date wise, like how much did 2 overlap with 1? It looks like it only overlapped for 4 harvest days. And little things like that are, if you have a lot of succession planting, I can filter it in a million different ways. And the more you play with it, the more useful it becomes. But
So Mary,
just
that Hedge Family Farm just asked,
Yeah.
Can you export graphs of those stats?
so it doesn't make graphs. I can export it. I can like do a CSV, or I can put it in Excel, and then from there make graphs. But this program itself doesn't make the jump directly from table form to graph form. And I actually, it's possible that maybe the pro version does more. We've never had it, but I know there's some other formats that you can have, but other than just tables. This thing is called grid format, but you can also do like forms and calendars, and it looks like they have timelines and other things. And so I know like even pivot tables and things like that you can do, but you have to upgrade to the pro version, which we just feel like we don't need. But we did some succession graphing specifically for, I can't remember, Soph left, she actually did the graphing, but it was tomatoes and cucumbers specifically. We wanted to see how they overlap since they're such long-term crops. And we just copied and pasted the data into Excel and then made the graphs.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. If you wouldn't mind filling out that survey I sent in the chat. Yeah, that'd be super great. We rely on surveys as well, so.
Yeah, and each of our
Where's
emails
that?
is just our name at wildhopefarm.com. Mine's Mary at Wild Hope Farm, and I think it's yours, Sophia.
Yeah, SOPIA.
Sophia at Wild Hope Farm. So if anybody is interested in contacting one of us directly about something that we talked about, feel free to follow up, and we're happy.
Where's the survey?
I sent it in the chat. I can resend it here. And then I'll also probably be following up with an email for y'all. Yeah.
Or we can talk about what we didn't talk about. We can talk about that too.
Yeah. We're chatty,
Awesome.
if you can't tell.
All right, well, thank you so much, you guys. This was so valuable, and it was really nice to learn about your operation and all the awesome things y'all have accomplished. We'll let you go. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
You're so
Thank you.
inspirational.
Happy, guys.